Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Chamber Podcast. My name is Rob Johnson. Joining me in studio today is Cheryl from JCW Marketing and Sales. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. So, first podcast?
First podcast.
All right.
Yep.
Nervousness level, 1 to 10, where are we at?
I don't know. Maybe 7?
7. You're an, you're an experienced speaker. You got.
Yeah, well, it's not a podcast.
That's true.
No,
That's a good point.
That's right.
So, Cheryl, there's a lot that you and your agency does for small businesses, and I want to hear it directly from you. How do you elevator pitch your business when you go into a room and they say, Cheryl, what is it that you do again?
Wow, fantastic. Well, so what we do is we help align marketing and sales, right? I mean, you've heard that age-old problem where the marketing team is saying, well, the sales isn't closing enough leads, and the sales team points to the marketing team saying, well, you're not giving enough or even quality leads, right? So they tend to fight each other back and forth a little bit. And so, our goal, in some of the product services that we do is really to help them get aligned. And in essence, then the company is growing more leads, closing more deals, and delighting more customers.
Okay. So how did you get started in all this? What made you want to leap into the wonderful world of entrepreneurship?
Wow, good question. So I spent, I'm not going to give you the number of years, a lot of years in the airline business.
An undisclosed
number of years in the airline business. I'll give you a little hint. So I started off with Northwest Airlines.
Okay.
And then went through the merger with Delta. And after, a couple years there, I decided, as much as I loved that business, it was crazy business, right? And I was really more on the sales side. So I had gotten my degrees in marketing, but focused more on the sales and ended up, leading a global sales team, right? And then decided it was time to stay off airplanes unless it was for fun.
Sure.
Which it was all fun, but, and then decided to start a business on my own. So, yep.
So what, as you kind of consider the landscape in the marketing and sales region, what made you land on this particular genre of business where you're merging and helping sales and marketing talk better with one another? Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say in the beginning, it was an ebb and flow, right? You like any business owner, you're trying something and that's failing or not, things change. And when I first started, because of my experience in sales and for so many years, I really wanted to zero in on the marketing side, right? Okay. So I really was like, okay, I went and got my master's in marketing. I really want to, focus on that and really stay as far away as I could from the airline business too, because I didn't want to get pigeonholed right into it. So as we started off in the marketing side, and then I was realizing as I was working with people that I have all this, great sales experience, and how can I help bridge those together, right? So now I've got, sort of both sides of my my experience kind of working together and talking, because honestly, that's what, that's what helps businesses run and keep their pipelines, moving. So it takes both sides.
Yeah. So a business like yours doesn't exist if business owners don't have challenges, right? If they don't have problems and conflicts and things that they need you to sort out, then, even businesses like mine don't exist. We need, there needs to be a problem to solve. So what would you say a small business's largest problem is when they give you a call and talk to you for the first time?
Not getting enough leads, right? I mean, it's really, they're not, they're not getting the customers, or they're not getting enough quality leads going through the process. And that goes back to what I said, earlier, as far as pointing to each other, and really it could be a mix of both, right? I mean, it could be both sides, but you're going to have to narrow in on it. But yeah, I would say is just really getting access to enough quality leads to get through your pipeline.
A business owner comes to you and this is Cheryl, and my pipeline's empty. There's nothing there. What's the first place we start? What do we do?
If it's completely depending on what they're coming to us for, right? We might set up a little bit of a call. Like, let's find out why. What is it? What are you doing today? We'll have a little bit of a conversation. What have you done in the past that has been working, right? and what have you tried that didn't work, so that way I can get a feel for, what's gonna be pertinent for you with your specific problem, right? So it's a little bit of fact finding.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And what would you say is, I'm sure you and I are both in the same camp, that a lot of businesses, they want overnight solutions. And in marketing and sales, the problem didn't develop overnight, therefore the solution's not going to develop overnight. So what do you tell people to kind of temper them on that, so they understand realistically how long these things take to work out?
Yeah, and it really, it kind of depends a little bit on the industry and their specific problem, right?
Sure.
So I mean, it can take it could take, depending on how deep the problem is, that could take some time.
Sure.
We developed a 9-step marketing program, which, we were promoting quite a bit before we even, through the chamber had offered, some snippets of it, or people to join for a discount, right? And they would go through, because it's not, everybody thinks like, okay, well, I just want to place my ad here and all of a sudden I'm going to get all this business. And that isn't exactly the way it works, right? You need to have goals. You need to understand what your niche is. You need to understand your customer, like you just said, with all those problems, right? And then how do you develop an offer that is going to meet those needs? And then from there, how do you build this marketing system, right? Because it's an ever-flowing machine, right? That you're trying to bring those leads in, get it through, but it's understanding who your client is and what their problems are, so that you can solve it for them.
I love it. And most of the listeners on this program are all small businesses and entrepreneurs, people in the prospective stage maybe of starting up their company. What do you find is the low-hanging fruit of, on the lead generation side of things? I know in my head what doesn't work, what I see people usually resort to. Mm-hmm. But what do you see that is effective if someone's getting started?
Well, it's funny because I think as you're building through and you understand who you serve and what their problems are, the number one best source for any business is through a referral, right? So if you think about it, you're now getting a lead that from somebody who knows and trusts you. That's probably, if they're referring you, they have that trust, and it's through somebody else who probably trusts them, right? So it's because you're always trying to build trust through the entire process. So now you escalated that process just a little bit faster, right? By getting that connection.
But on trust, that's something that I find business owners do a pretty poor job of being able to maintain in the early stages, because there's so many variables happening at once. It's hard to maintain quality control through all of those cycles, even in the sales cycle. What do you find is the best way for people to make sure that they're maintaining trust as they go from the advertising and marketing process into the sales cycle?
Wow. Having, again, consistency, doing, once you have a process, putting processes in place with any part of your business, whether it's in sales, whether it's the operations side, right? You want to know what step goes next, and there should be no question within your organization as to what that is, right? No. So things don't get lost along the way. And it's easy for small entrepreneurs to get things lost along the way because they're typically out there trying to be this person, right, within the organization to keep it floated, right? So making sure that there's a specific process, whether it be from the marketing side, transition into sales, right? And then through to that close, and then to the delivery.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation. It turned into a small, very friendly debate recently. But basically, I was talking to a sales guy and his team, and he was asking me. He's like, "What do you think? Like, who should call the shots in the marketing and sales hierarchy?" So I'll tell you my answer, what I told him. I'm curious what yours is, because they're not 50-50. They can't be.
No.
Because it's just like, someone has to be driving the ship. So in your opinion, and then I'll tell you what I told him.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's a good question, because now you're having both my sides. My
absolutely.
Personalities fight with each other, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I always say. First of all, the salespeople, their feet on the ground, right? They're the ones listening to the customer, because we just said you got to understand what the customer's challenges are. And if you don't have that down right, and the closest person to that customer is that salesperson.
Absolutely.
So I would say that now, do they call the shots? That I would struggle with a little bit, because they don't necessarily have the, all of the, what do I want to say, all the right processes in place. Because I'll tell you, salespeople also don't like the processes you put in place.
Sure.
Right? They're like herding wild cats. You know what I mean? They're like, well, I don't want to use that system because I got it in my head or whatever. You know, so it is a little bit of a balance. So I'm curious about your answer.
Yeah. So what I told him was, I said, you are the people interfacing with the customer. So you know their reactions. You know the things that you say that get a great response. Mm-hmm. And you know the things that you say that don't get a good response. That's all copywriting and design elements that we can build into that marketing platform. Mm-hmm. So you absolutely need to be driving the ship in terms of what data you're giving us and how that informs our marketing processes. And the salespeople aren't going to know, the best way to set up a CRM or a landing page. And that's not their job. But I think marketing people need to do a much better job of listening to the sales team, because out of that's going to come all of the design and copywriting prompts that you're going to use. Because if they're having success on the ground, those are the types of things you can have success with on the website.
That's right.
So it was really good, because I think they've always had a history of like the same thing where it's like, two different stories or two different accounts for how we want to get this thing done. And for me, it's always like, who's the closest person to the customer? Mm-hmm. Because if we can reverse engineer that success and make it online, then we're probably in pretty good shape.
That's right.
So you guys do marketing and sales, obviously heavy on the consulting end, making sure the processes are in place. Tell me more about JCW and what more you do.
Yeah. So, when we look at solving the problems, and I'd like to, probably focus on a little bit on our quality and quantity of leads, right?
Yeah,
really focus in on two different things. So if we're looking from a very micro, right? Because we could sit here for days and talk about marketing, but if you're focusing on those two things and you're really trying to get a good quality lead, like I mentioned earlier, was a little bit about a referral, right? But how can you get those referrals? Or we like to call it BOPA, borrowing other people's audiences, right? So that is maybe just as simple as a referral partner. You see those in the real estate business, right? A loan officer might be reaching out and developing relationships with a realtor, because, for a realtor to close a home, they got to get a loan, and they got to make sure it's somebody they trust that's going to be able to close that deal, right? And that's where those leads come through, right? So that's certainly a line of leads that are coming through. It might be from, networking groups, right? We see the chamber also has like bunch of different networking groups that you can meet. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. Right. And so you're trying to develop that piece of it. So that's through those relationships. Another opportunity is this podcast, right? You're probably singing in your ear on this one. It's really just a way to get in front of a whole nother audience, borrowing other people's audiences, right? So the chamber has an audience. I was fortunate enough to come in and present. People get to know me. A little bit about what we do, and we're going to give them some good information. And frankly, podcasters, and you probably can say, they need content, right? So they're looking for other experts to host, for you to have questions and get that information out and get some exposure. A third way we do that with some folks is through webinars, right? So you might do your own webinar, trying to teach them on a specific topic, but you might say, hey, that's my own audience. But really, if you find somebody else to interview, much like a podcast's a little bit more regular, but this is more of a presentation. You might do something on LinkedIn, and now you've got two audiences, right? So you got to find somebody that is serving the same target audience, but isn't your direct competitor, right? So those are ways to get good quality leads coming through.
Excellent. And when the scales flip and you want volume, how do you maintain that quality as you crank up the volume?
Yeah. So when you look at, and it's really by layering in, so a lot of times we'll layer in other processes in there, right? So if you think about it from a volume perspective, you might be going after like lists. Like there's ways to get so many lists out there from some data publishers that are out there, on the internet asking questions. There's, co-registration data, people doing surveys. Are you going to be buying or selling your house anytime soon, right? And that data gets sold, right? You're doing that and it gets sold.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing. So, but if you actually layer something in, because if there's one thing that I know, there's some of them out there that do like it, but most salespeople don't love to do cold calls, right? So it's really dialing for dollars, and it's a lot. So that's about getting a big quantity of leads that you're able to feed through. So we have some programs in place like cold email that we might be doing some outreach to and try to do some appointment setting, or phone calls, right? So making those, outbound calls, it's volumes, right? You have to get through the volumes in order to get it.
Yeah.
But, obviously with that, you could do it on your own, but with that comes a lot of tools. Like there's a lot of tools and systems that you have to know and be able to work through to make sure that your emails are getting delivered, right? Make sure that you're not hurting your domain. Make sure your phone calls are getting answered. There's shake and stir now that's out there that, possible scam, or spam or whatever that's coming up on your mobile phone.
You were right the first time, scam.
Right.
You were right the first time. Yeah, I see that. And for our office phone, we have a Google Pixel, and they have their call detection software built into that phone. So it tells like, here's your telemarketer. Do you want to screen this call? So it'll throw it through AI and work it through those paces before it gets to us, so we can actually if it's legitimate or not.
Right.
But yeah, the volume game is dangerous because you can waste a lot of time and not make a lot of progress. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely something that businesses need to really consider is how much money are we wasting on these resources and what outcome are we tracking?
Right. What's working and what's not? Because they work. They do work. I mean, I've got the appointment setters setting appointments, for our business. And it works, so it's really understanding the process, the tools, what's that hook, right? With anything, any kind of program that you're running, what's the hook that's going to get them to go like, wow, that's my problem, and I think they can solve it for me.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, so we talk about kind of what the hook is. So when we look at your business, look at JCW overall, what's one of the things that distinguishes you from other marketing and sales consulting agencies in the marketplace?
Well, a lot of years of experience, right? So, being somebody that has worked in the I want to say the trenches, but doing those work. I mean, like we do for ourselves what we do for our customers, right? So we're always looking for something that works, and it's a lot of, we constantly changing, right? So I'll be talking to some of my clients and talk about a program that we're running. They're like, how long have you been doing this? And it's like, well, an iteration of it for a long time, but you're constantly changing because there's always things that are changing, right?
Yeah. And that's a mark of a good business, is one that's willing to pivot and move to new things.
Solve the new problem, right?
Yeah, right now in our industry, AI is entering the marketplace, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that is adopted and how people are going to use it. I'm really excited to see how the next year or so plays out, because it's just like the wave is just starting; it hasn't even peaked yet, and I'm really anxious to see how it's adopted. Right,
how it's adopted and what people, you think about it. And you say those words to this audience, and what does it mean to them, right? What's it? And it's all evolving. It's all evolving.
Yeah, it's in our industry, it's a similar thing to when self-checkouts came into supermarkets. Mm-hmm. You're going to have someone managing that one area now, whereas it used to take 8 people to do that one thing. That's what I think is going to happen. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else for JCW? What else do you want the listeners know as we look to wrap up today?
First of all, I'd love to make a gift to the listeners today, right? Yeah. If they go to jcwagency.com/Brighton Chamber Podcast, right? You have a choice. So we're going to either show you how you can have an appointment setter that's paid on commission only, or get some, leads for 30 days for free.
Okay.
How's
awesome.
that? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, so just go on and, fill out the form and, you'll talk to someone on our team, likely me,
Okay.
but and then we'll have a little chat about some of your problems and get you hooked up.
I love it. So we'll make sure that's included in the show notes. So if you're looking to get one of those 2 offers, that's very generous of you. Absolutely recommend people taking up on that and just seeing. It never hurts to have a conversation just to start walking through that problem.
That's right.
Anything else before I like to wrap today, Cheryl?
No, I mean, I think it's been fun today. It's been fun chatting. I mean, obviously there's this side of it, and then this is getting the leads, and then there's the whole part once you get them, what do you do with them?
Oh, yeah.
But that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it?
We'll have to have you back for a part 2 and talk
right.
about the curation of those leads and how that works out.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for stopping by.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Chamber Podcast. I appreciate you watching. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.